This is WGBB AM 1240 and W240 DFFM 95.9 Freeport, New York.
It is time for StreetWise with former Chief of the New York City Sheriff's Department, former Chief of the Seagate Police Department, retired New York City Detective, Time Warner Public Access Media Award, Joe Franklin Super Excellence in Broadcasting Memory Lane Award, New York Veteran Police Association StreetWise production, host of StreetWise, Mr. Lou Telano.
Welcome back to StreetWise. There's a lot of highly contested elections throughout the country, but this one in particular is, my guest happens to be a high school, what am I talking about? History and government. So maybe he can change history a little bit. I just got to talk about him for a second. He's a former New York's finest. He is a history and government teacher, actually in his alma mater, and he's a Bronx guy. So to me, he's like a neighborhood guy. But before I mention his name, I just want to say a couple of things. I was born in New York's Lower East Side. It was a mixed neighborhood, and everybody, the different ethnic groups, had different visions of what they wanted to be. So the Irish kids, they were going to be either a fireman, a cop, or a priest. I'm sure my guest probably thought of that down the line somewhere, because looking at him, it says, I see a little connection there. Okay, my guest is running in a tough district, only tough because the opponent, talking about history, she made history, 28 years old, and she became a congresswoman. I want to welcome John Cummings. Welcome to StreetWise.
Lou, thank you for having me. Good to be here.
Good. Now, you're running against, she became so popular, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. So now that you just got to say AOC, and everyone seems to know her. So how do we get people to know you, John? So while you're running, can we get a little nickname or something?
Yeah, well, we didn't need the nickname, but we've done a great job of getting out on the street and talking to the people of the district. I'm very well known in most of the Bronx part of the district anyway. I mean, I've lived and or worked here in this district for 60 years, at least in the Bronx part of the district. And like I said, the recognition was good. Now it's better between digital advertising and commercials and just being out on the street for month after month after month, telling people what we're all about. It's gone extremely, extremely well. As for the Congresswoman, I've said this since the beginning.
Yeah.
She's done an unbelievable job creating a national persona for herself.
Yeah.
But she's not interested in serving the district. And as you get around the district like I have, you realize that everybody knows that she's not here. And she really has no interest in serving the district, to the point where she never opened an office in the Bronx part of the district. The district is 65% in Queens, 35% in the Bronx, and she never opened a dedicated office in the Bronx.
She seems to be going national, but she prefers going national as opposed to the 14th Congressional District, which is the Bronx and Queens. But why do you think her purpose is more outside than inside, where she should be?
Yeah, and I think it's been that way from the beginning. Her whole Green New Deal, that's a big part of who she is and what she does. But obviously, she leaves the district behind. It started with the Amazon deal that she basically blew. It was 25,000 Amazon jobs, plus all the mom and pop stores, plus all the private investment around the area, plus the construction jobs for our union workers. I mean, it was a big mistake in my opinion. And since that time, she hasn't really changed. I mean, she voted against USMCA. Fortunately, that passed. She's come out against Tim Scott's Opportunity Zones, which has created $75 billion of private investments around the country. We have 11 of those zones in District 14. She's come out against that. So she's really anti-job, and it really shows how detached she is from the district.
Now, folks, what John Cummings, when he mentioned the Amazon deal, they were going to build a big Amazon facility, Long Island City, right walking distance to Queensbridge houses, if I'm not mistaken, and people that could use jobs, especially a lot of the jobs that they were looking forward to. What I know, because I know, because I've talked to some of the people that live there, even if they didn't finish high school, they can be a maintenance person, a laborer, work in sanitation, or a porter. She blew that. Why do you think that she was against that great Amazon deal? Like you touched on, would have been many jobs in the 14th Congressional District, John.
I really don't know, Lou, if she understood the entire process.
Yes.
From what I've read, it sounds as if she thought that the state and city were going to write Amazon a $3 billion check, and that's not how it works. you get $3 billion in tax abatements, and a company like Amazon comes in and makes this huge investment that would have created, like I said, 25,000 Amazon jobs plus everything that grows up around it. I just think she had no concept. Plus, she views projects like that or tax incentives like that, same thing with the opportunity zones, she views them as quote unquote corporate welfare. And that just tells me that she really doesn't have a firm grasp of economics at all, because I think everybody knows one of the hard facts of life is that poor people don't create jobs. Wealthy people do by investment. And that's just the nature of the beast. And one of the old untold stories about the Amazon deal was it also shows you that Governor Cuomo and Mayor de Blasio know for a fact that taxes are too high in New York to start a business. Because they had to give Amazon that break to attract them. That means they really should give it to everybody, including Joe's Hardware, if Joe wants to open a store.
Very good. But she used that. I think she used that. Didn't she use that as one of the reasons why she opposed it?
Yeah, she thinks that it's corporate welfare, but the taxes are way too high, as everybody knows in New York City. It's one of the worst business climates that you can actually operate in. But that was a big mistake. And like I said, she views the opportunity zones as the same. And that's a huge mistake. These are jobs that people in District 14 need. Yeah.
Now, hopefully, if you take over the 14th congressional district, Bronx and Queens, would you visit that again? Would you reach out for corporations similar to Amazon and try to bring work and business and economic improvement in the 14th congressional district, John?
Oh, most certainly. I mean, I certainly think that anytime you can reorganize the tax structure so you can bring somebody in like that, you have to do it.
Yeah.
The other thing that we're really looking hard at, we've been looking at throughout this campaign, is infrastructure improvement. As you're familiar with the district, we have the Cross Bronx that runs right through the district. It's the heaviest traveled piece of highway in the United States.
Yeah.
And the big problem that we have with the Cross Bronx is that it often causes a lot of our truckers, who are a very important part of our economy, obviously, it causes them to time out. And they have to get off the road, and there is not a truck stop from the Lombardi Center out by the Meadowlands to Norwalk, Connecticut. So we're trying to identify spots in the area where we could build a truck stop, one in the Bronx, one in Queens. And it's twofold. One, you're giving the truckers a much needed break in an area where they can actually relax. And two, it gets all the trucks off the street because they're on the service roads, they're on the side streets, they're along the highway, they're on the shoulder of the highway. It's wherever they can go because they legally have to get off the road. So all of those are job creators. They're all common sense approaches. And it's just something that I think we lack in Washington in general. Absolutely.
It seems like they're oblivious to a lot of common sense things that we have to be concerned with. Now, you mentioned the new Green Deal. Again, Ocasio, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, AOC, she's against all fossil fuel. In my opinion, it's ridiculous because we can't function in this country, can't function in the world without fossil fuel. I just want to remind the audience what she wants to do is eliminate coal, crude oil, natural gas, and mining and fracturing, which is important. Your thoughts on fracturing, which seems to be an issue all over the country. Now, you're going to be hopefully in Congress, so that should be a concern of yours.
Oh, it sure is. And unfortunately, in New York, Governor Cuomo banned the fracking, and you go right across the border into Pennsylvania, central and west Pennsylvania, booming because of it. I think that, when you look at that Green New Deal and the approach that they want to take, the hard left, the socialist left, when it comes to energy, the only people that's really going to hurt more than anybody else are the people that they claim that they want to help. And that's the people who live in poverty. It's just going to make everything way more expensive. I sometimes really wonder, Lou, whether or not they understand economics at all. Because if the price of energy goes up, everything goes up. The price of food goes up. The price of producing food goes up. And then people just will not be able to live the lives that they need to live. So I understand that we need to take care of the environment. We need to be stewards of the environment. Everybody understands that. But I think what really should happen is that the people will demand it and the free market will produce it. It never works out through government mandates of any kind. Government mandates are two words we should never repeat together.
But her new Green Deal, it seems to be like a party. Seems to be as opposed to Democratic, Republican, Independent, Liberal, whatever, So people assume the new Green Deal is like a new Green Party, and in some ways it is, because it's like a progressive type of movement. Am I correct on that? Pretty much what she's trying to do.
I think it's just socialism under another guise. It's just
Very
big
good.
government. It's government control of everything.
Yeah.
You know, from energy to food production to living. I mean, they've talked about tearing down buildings and rebuilding buildings that are far more environmentally friendly, whatever that means.
Whatever that means.
It's just like I said, it's total control. It's socialism under another guise, and it would be disastrous for the United States.
Yeah, they take a socialist name and they call it progressive. I feel you're actually 100% correct. But we can't do without the electricity because or fracturing or fossil fuel, because how can we run our corporations, our homes? It's and I just got to correct myself. It's called fracking, and that's exactly. There's another word in there I want to say about it, but you might not. You being a Catholic school teacher, I have to be very careful.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I
was a cop too. Don't forget that.
Well, I'm going to jump in because I have a question.
Sure.
A cop sent me a question to ask you, and it's John Cummings was a former cop, a New York City cop, and now he's an educator. How does he get along? I'm quoting him, because in today's world, you got to be politically correct. I don't have to tell you that. And he was saying, so how does he interact with all these liberal educators? John, how do you do that?
Well, first of all, I taught. I gave it up a few weeks ago. It was just too much to do both, so I actually had to step aside. But teaching, and I teach in Catholic school. I was teaching in Catholic school, St. Raymond's High School for boys, and it really wasn't the issue that it is at the public school level. I mean, there are some teachers that have some bias, but we pretty much try to keep it as to the straight and narrow as we can. It sometimes is unavoidable, because of the way they restructured textbooks. I've talked at length about this throughout my campaign. If you remember the Common Core curriculum that was put through, in the last decade, a lot of the parents complained about the math. Oh my gosh, I can't do the math. I can't help my kids with the math. At the same time, they went back and rewrote all the American history books.
Imagine that.
Yeah, and they made America look like not a great place in many cases. And so that's something that we have to interpret and try to get through. A lot of the state, the state regents, the New York state regents that you have to pass. It's very, I call it, it's a politically correct Trivial Pursuit game. They don't ask as many history questions as they should. But as far as me being a teacher and having issue with other teachers, I don't think it's as much of an issue in private school as it is in public.
It's true. Well, yes, he probably didn't realize that, and you probably get a lot. But you also said it's tough in today's world to be not politically astute for some reason, and we do know the reason, because we have a highly, what can I say? We have a major presidential race going on, which could affect the whole country and it could affect our history, and that's where you come in. So it must, John Cummings, it must probably annoy you teaching history as well as government. We all know that there's an attempt to not also change history, to eliminate history. How are we able to function with your students? Because I'm sure that comes up as one of the major questions for you as an educator.
Yeah, it really did, as far as trying to remove statues, and I always tell my students that first of all, you can't judge historical figures by today's moral standards.
Yeah,
just not fair. The second thing I always tell them is that, look, you leave statues up of people. Some of them might be controversial. Some of them perhaps should come down, but most of them shouldn't. But it should be up to your parents or your teachers to point to that person if you don't really like what they stood for and say, hey, this is what things were like then, and here's what they're like now.
Yeah.
So it makes young people appreciate what they have instead of what it was like. And all the people that had to make those changes, in many cases, pay a price to make those changes. So you get the point, those statues, to point to what it was like. Once the statues are gone, what do you point to?
That's right. So in other words, we'd have to change history every half a century.
Yeah, and it's just so misguided, all of it. And you know what? The students understand that. If you're straight with students, if you're straight with kids, and you tell them factual things, they appreciate it. They totally understand what you're talking about. I always had a rule in my class. I taught government, And if
Yeah.
you want to talk the liberal points, I'll be the conservative. If you want to talk the conservative points, I'll be the liberal.
Oh, great.
Because my job as a teacher was to get kids to think, not to tell them how to think. And we need to have more of that in the classroom.
Wow. Okay. Now you're running, John Cummings, you're running in the 4th Congressional District. And could you let the audience
14,
know?
right. New York 14.
The 14th, correct? 14th
Right.
CD, and that covers the Bronx. Could you let the listening audience or watching audience know what that area covers, 14th CD?
Sure, it's a really interesting district. I mean,
Yes.
they carved it out for Joe Crowley.
Yeah.
In the Bronx, it's City Island, Country Club, Throgs Neck, Pelham Bay, Morris Park, and Parkchester. And over in Queens, it's Malba, College Point, Corona, East Elmhurst,
Wow.
parts of Astoria, Sunnyside, Woodside, and that's about it. The Jackson Heights. I mean, the fact that it goes from City Island to Sunnyside is crazy, but that's what it is. And
Yeah.
it's a very diverse area. It's in many ways residential. I think that the congresswoman and the media are both guilty of trying to make this district out to be like it's the hood. It is not.
Wow.
There's a lot of private investment here. There's a lot of business owners. A lot of people own their own homes, and they don't like the idea that she wants to, defund police. Certainly, the people that live here don't want to lose their health insurance. They don't want to lose their 401ks. They have too much invested in the community. And a lot of people, even though it's a heavily Democrat district, they've come over to my side and are giving me support in a big way.
Well, you mentioned Joe Crowley and you mentioned the Democratic. So obviously, Joe Crowley was the former candidate before AOC. The former, I should say, congressman before AOC, but he was also the head of the Democratic organization there, and she was able somehow to knock him out of his seat pretty much, and he was the head of the party. Does that have? What's your thoughts on that? Now you're going to pretty much now. Plus, he just won a primary, challenging her own party. So, where I'm sitting, obviously I'm with you. I have no problem saying that, but it's going to be kind of tough. She could beat her own party. So you coming in as a Republican candidate, it's a lot heavier. It's more of a burden for you to carry, John Cummings.
Yeah, I think, though, that the one thing that we've spelled out from the beginning is that while this is a heavily Democrat district, it's not a heavily socialist district.
Yes, good.
And I've been able to reach the middle ground people. And I've always said from the beginning that I have a lot more in common with Joe Crowley's voters than she does.
Yeah.
Crowley was a union guy. I'm a union guy. I've been in multiple unions for 40 years. I've lived and worked in the district. I was a homeowner in the district. I raised my kids in the district. I have a lot in common with the people, and they see that. Whereas the congresswoman is about as hard left as you can go. Yeah. And like I said before, there's a lot of people in this district, especially union people, who over the years have given up raises so that they could have better health insurance. And now she wants to ban private insurance and put everybody on a line with 330 million people. And it's not just the union people that dislike that idea. Seniors don't like that idea.
You're right.
Because then seniors won't have anything special. That means it'll be Medicare for all, and then you'll be on the line with everybody else. So those are all selling points that have really brought me quite a bit of attention from not just Democrats, but we're going to be getting the endorsement of some trade unions coming up. And that generally doesn't happen for Republican candidates.
Well, some people, which is I agree with too. They say whatever she says, AOC, of course, I'm referring to, very vague, unbelievable, and even delusional. And but yet she's so damn popular. Your thoughts on that, John Cummings?
Well, like I said, she's done a great job of creating the national persona, and the media grabbed onto her, and nobody really pushes her on any issues. We challenged her to a series of debates. We did so about 12 days ago. The first one was supposed to be last Monday night. She sent a notice to the Civic Association that was hosting it that day that she wouldn't be attending, and that she wouldn't be attending any live events because of the COVID virus.
Wow.
Now, this past Friday night, she made an appearance at a local civic association. So we put out a release today saying, okay, you said you wouldn't debate because you wouldn't want to come to a live event, but you came to a live event. So what is it?
You're right.
So hopefully we'll get an answer. I would love to have the opportunity to debate the Congresswoman, particularly because I think it's such an important part of the process. I think people need to hear both sides. I think they need a clear vision of what both candidates stand for, and I think that's the only way to do it.
Well, the advice, which is to avoid any debates, with your opponent. It works because, I've done what you did many years ago. I don't know if you know what John Cummings, but I hate to talk about myself only, but it does connect with what you're doing. So I ran for Congress also. And the reason why it's sort of colorful is because of the person I ran against. I ran against Anthony Weiner. And,
right.
Yeah, and I ran against him in his first time he ran for Congress. But he was a city councilman. He had Chuck Schumer. He had the party behind him. And like you, I was running against 3-1 or 4-1. But the advantage that you have, and you touched on, is that you're going to get some people from the other party, Democrats, that's the way it looks to me, because they are not, who she calls progressive. They are not socialists. They're not communists. So they have to see that. So I would doubt if she would accept a debate with you, John Cummings. I would doubt that. It'd be foolish.
I don't think she will either. I'm hoping that she does. It's kind of a no-win situation for her.
Yeah,
sure. And especially if I could talk a little bit about myself. I mean,
yes,
I'm an educator. I stand up in front of students for 22 years and talk about government and civics. So I can do that. It's not difficult for me to get up and talk. I used to tell people that when you teach 5 40-minute classes a day, which is what we do, you're on stage for 200 minutes, which is about 20 minutes longer than you would be if you were a comedian in Las Vegas, if you did 3 one-hour stand-ups.
It's just I look back at when Ocasio-Cortez was a freshman in Congress not too long ago. Of course, it was. And my question is, to Congress, how was she in the position, and I call it interrogate, to cross-examine Tom Homan, who was for over 30 years was the head. He was in ICE, and he was the director of ICE. A 28-year-old girl who wasn't born when he was a law enforcement officer, yet all of a sudden, out of clear blue sky, she becomes a lawmaker because she's a congresswoman. And I'm saying, how the heck was this permitted? If you were put into a position like that, I know he did, Tom Homan did straighten her out to it. In other words, he almost said, I don't think you know what the hell you're talking about. But why would they put someone, some with her background or little or no background sitting in Congress? And I don't know what committee she was on. I don't know what committee she's on now, but I'm sure you do. And again, you talked for hundreds of hours and many years now. How was she able to do that? And why did they allow her to do that? In other words, right now, one of our concerns is law and order. And what the heck did she know about law and order? She was 28 years old, and that pisses me off. I don't know what your thoughts on that, where she was permitted to do that.
Well, I think it was quite obvious that she was overmatched pretty quickly by Tom Homan, who I see all the time. He's tremendous, and his passion was even at a higher level than hers. And another thing about Tom is that he probably knows more statistics about immigration and customs enforcement and law enforcement than anybody I know.
Correct.
But so he's an ace. But yeah, they give you these assignments, and they're supposed to be based on hopefully your areas of expertise.
Yeah.
And and this is not a knock, but when when you're not 60 years old and you are 28 years old, 29 years old, what is your area of expertise? You might have learned a lot in college, but you haven't had practical knowledge.
Yeah.
You don't gain that. So I think sometimes being 60 has a great advantage. I pointed that out to some people yesterday. I said, hey, you know what? Sometimes there is an advantage when you're running for office to being a little bit older, because I have all of this life experience.
Correct.
And I can use it positively to help the people of the district and hopefully help the people of the country.
Yeah. So you think that she's a little cocky, I use that word, by not being out there in the 14th congressional district like you're doing, because she feels like a lot of politician candidates do that. They become so sure of themselves. You think that's going to hurt her? I mean, you touched on it before. I think it does. Or she feels that I don't know what she feels. Why do you think she's doing? Her lack of campaigning in their own district?
I think she probably looks at the statistics and sees that it's about 7-1 Democrats or Republican in the district, and it's understandable. And she probably looks at the demographics of the district, which is 50% Hispanic. But that's very short-sighted. First of all, Hispanics don't vote as a group. There's a lot of diversity within the Hispanic community anyway. And anytime you overlook, do so at your own peril, because let's be honest, that's how she beat Joe Crowley. He wasn't paying a ton of attention to her.
Right.
And only about 30,000 of the 200,000 registered Democrats voted in that primary.
Wow.
She beat him, and she beat him 16,000 plus to about 13,000 plus. She didn't even beat him by 3,000 votes, but only 30,000 people voted out of 200,000. That's how you end up with people like that in office.
Wow. There's a similarity there with Elliot Engel. He got knocked out of his seat as well, a very popular guy in that Democratic world. And I don't know, it's like a progressive person like AOC knocked him out as well. I hope that's not, I hope that's not the direction that we're going in with this progressive, movement.
Yeah, that's the Democratic Socialists. They've done a great job of identifying seats that they think that they can win. They go in there, they spend a ton of money, they're well financed, and they identify people that have been in place for a long time and seem to have become a bit complacent. And, sometimes, young and exuberant looks better than old and tired. It just does. But once you get young and exuberant in there and you realize what their ideas are, you kind of say, boy, I'll take old and tired back in a minute.
Yeah,
so, I think some people are waking up to that. I think some people that are in office are waking up to that. You don't want to get anybody to sneak up on you like that, like happened with Congressman Crowley. But on the other hand, I think that you can become comfortable no matter how old you are.
Right.
So hopefully I can take advantage of that.
Right. Well, of course, obviously, maybe because of my age, I look forward to experience as well. How could you not, especially what's going on throughout the countries? We talked about it because you're a history and government teacher and knocking down the statues. And there was a law that was passed by the president in regard to knocking down federal statues. You get 10 years in prison. I mean, your thoughts on that? This is,
I saw it. I think it's necessary, especially if the local law enforcement, it's not necessarily the law enforcement, if the local authorities aren't going to tell local law enforcement, hey, you got to enforce this, make sure that this doesn't happen. The federal government had to step in.
Yes.
Especially when it was, when it had to do with federal property. But like I said, that whole movement of tearing down people from the past is so misguided. It really shows you how short-sighted the left is. You need to learn from your mistakes. I mean, and that's what a lot of that is, to be honest with you. Yeah. I have no problem. Even down, I discussed this with my students, and it was a little bit controversial with the statues of the Confederate generals.
Yeah.
Now, the reason that all those statues exist in the South is because the Union, after the war, as part of like a peace agreement, said, look, we're all going to come back together. We need to bring the country back together. So we will salute your leaders just like we saluted our leaders. So it was kind of like a peace offering to the South. I think that never really got out. And you're like, well, why would they have those statues down there? That's why, because the Union thought it was important to recognize those leaders, that the South could do that, but it was really more of a peace offering. And I think that we did a very poor job of relaying that information. And you know what? When I told my students that, and my students were 88% minority, my students understood it.
Well, it's history, whether we're, wrong, right, or indifferent. It's history.
Absolutely.
It's so, but yet, now I'm also glad another thing that was recently done by federal government, and aside from all these, they call them demonstrations, but you and I know they're riots, and they happen to be in all democratic cities or states. And they're out of control. Again, we don't have to, we all know that. But the federal government just came in, and I'm glad they did, in New York City, and they locked up, I think there were 10 people for carrying firearms. And I know there was, I know NYPD was happy about it because they were eliminating the stop and frisk, which we're both very familiar with, and the anti-crime. And then, of course, handcuffing NYPD, you and I both being a cop in New York City. So we know, obviously, they use the reason they use it's because it's racial. Meanwhile, 99.9% of the people that are being shot and murdered happen to be minorities. So actually, it saves minority lives. So the government coming in and making these 10 arrests because they found a loophole or they found a legality to make it a federal offense. You think that this should happen more often in some of these Democratic-run cities and states, John Cummings?
Yeah, it's unfortunate that it ever got to that. Because we were around and we were both officers under Democrat mayors.
Yes.
And as far left as they were, you didn't have that issue.
That's true.
Even when Mayor Dinkins was there, and I know he gets beat up quite a bit by the right. He still hired Ray Kelly. He had the sense to bring in some good people at the top.
Yeah.
And to try to straighten things out, and the law was there behind it. But I think we just ended up in the perfect storm when you combine the fact that you have an administration at the city level led by Mayor de Blasio that doesn't back law enforcement at all. And then you combine it with the bail reform, it's open season. Plus, wanting to close Rikers, plus you have fewer people in jail, plus the COVID. It's just completely turned around. So I think if the federal government saw that opening, they took it, and they probably had to take it. Do I like to see the federal government interfering in state and city relations? No, not necessarily with law enforcement. No, but if you're in that position, and it's unfortunate that we're in that position, you have to take it.
Well, we looks like we had no choice in that matter. But you mentioned bail reform. Those people that were arrested, they were out in the street as a result of the bail reform.
Right.
Yeah.
And that bail reform, I was discussing this with somebody at a forum the other night. The big issue for me with that bail reform was that there were no hearings. No sheriffs, no prosecutors, no defense attorneys, no former judges, no people from law enforcement went in and testified about proposed legislation. They wrote it, they gave it to the governor, he signed it, and you ended up with the revolving door that you got. And I'm sure you saw recently, there was a young man in the paper, 5 times this year already, he's assaulted a police officer and gotten out every time. 5 times. One time he hit them with one of the gates that they use for crowd control, one of those metal gates. Another time he headbutted an officer and got out as well. I mean, that's just insanity.
Well, I think it's going to happen more often because it has to, because people like de Blasio are not going to do anything. It's a result of de Blasio, again, while we're losing New York City. Now, is Rikers Island is that in your area, 14?
It is. The district has some really interesting things in it.
I know.
We have the Trump Golf Course. We have City Field. Wow. We have the Tennis Center. Wow. We have LaGuardia Airport, and we have Rikers Island. So it's really kind of an interesting district. We have some interesting landmarks.
Colorful district.
Yeah, it really is.
You feel that the suggestion by Democratic Mayor Bill de Blasio about closing Rikers Island? Your thoughts on that?
It's probably one of the worst ideas of all time. As it was pointed out to me, we are probably the envy of every large city in the country in that we have our entire jail system on an island and not in anybody's neighborhood.
Right.
So instead, they want to close Rikers Island and put up jails in everybody's neighborhood, especially in light of the fact that many of these neighborhoods have been somewhat gentrified. There have been investment. They built some affordable housing in these areas. They've cleaned them up. And now we're going to put a jail there. Why don't they just redo Rikers Island? Another point that was made to me, and I think it's a really good one. Rikers Island has separate facilities.
Correct.
Meaning that they have a juvenile facility, they have a women's facility, they have an elderly facility, they have a regular population facility.
Right.
What are you going to do when you're opening jails in boroughs? Are you going to have 4 different types of facilities in one building? Are you going to build 4 different buildings in each borough? What are you going to do? I mean, it's so short-sighted, this idea. My understanding is 6 buildings on Rikers Island. Invest the money into those 6 buildings, redo them, and keep your entire population there. It's far more manageable.
Your dad was. I was on a job during the same period. Your dad wasn't. He recalls this as much as I do. Aside from being a former New York City correction officer, I walked the beat in the jails before I walked the beat in the streets. We had a jail. We had a jail in every borough. There was a jail. In fact, there was one where I started as a correction officer right across the street from Yankee Stadium.
Right.
And the one near the courts. So the idea at that time was to close all these jails. because in these different various boroughs for many reasons, and consolidating, put them all on one big island was a great idea. So, in fact, people in those areas, they didn't want a jail in their area because it brought in people come in who are visitors. They're also criminals. The people, they had to change the visiting hours in the Bronx jail while I was working there. I was in my 20s, because if there was a night game,
Yeah, the Yankees were playing.
they couldn't get to their cars, John Cummings. They couldn't. They were getting mugged, and they had to put, believe it or not, because I've done it. When there was a night game, they put a correction officer standing on a corner there, right outside the old Bronx jail. Armed, of course, and that was to be a deterrent, so people could walk to their cars. So I don't know this idea. Well, I think the property's worth a lot of money. So I'm going in that direction. One of the reasons.
Yeah, I've heard that they want to develop it for condominiums and stuff. But if you think about it, they really can't do skyscrapers there because the airport's there.
Correct.
My gut tells me that after putting $8 billion into LaGuardia Airport, maybe they want to extend the runways to make the airport operations bigger.
Very good idea. Good thoughts.
I can't think of anything else. I mean, you can't build a lot of houses there simply because it's that close to the airport. You're in the flight pattern. There's only 2 runways in and out of there, 3113 and 22-4. Yeah. That's it. So maybe they'd like to extend the operations. They spent that much money on the terminal. That's a big terminal for a small airport.
Yeah. So what other ideas, aside from that you would like to see or like to be part of, or even like to put some legislation in when, I'm going to say when you become the congressperson of the 14th CD? Any ideas or vision that you would like to implement, John Cummings?
Yeah, well, we talked about the infrastructure improvements. I think those are key. The truck stops are very, very important. Like I said, we identified 2 areas, one up by Co-op City and one over by the old Flushing Airport. We think that would be great. Another thing that we looked into was the possibility of decking on 95 Bruckner and Tremont, where they have an underpass there, but it's open. If you could deck those for parking, municipal parking, so people could actually park their cars and go and visit the stores that are on Tremont Avenue. It would be great for the store owners. It would be great for the neighborhood. So many people go shopping at malls and they leave New York City and they'll go up into Westchester and like to go shopping because there's nowhere to park. If we could build a place for people to park, maybe they would frequent the local stores a bit more and help all the store owners out. We think that's a good one. The other one we were looking at was right down by the Trump Links in the far part of Ferry Point Park, which I grew up in, but it's really not used. The possibility of having long-term parking and ferry service right to the new LaGuardia terminal. So you could park long-term parking on the Bronx side of the bridge. People from Connecticut, Westchester, and the Bronx could park there, just jump on the ferry and go right into the terminal. I mean, they built that, like I said, they built that beautiful terminal over there, but they didn't change the roads any, and they can't. So, you're basically trying to ease traffic in the Bronx and on the Queens side. And I think it would be great it's a job creator.
Yeah.
Ferry services like that are private work, the ones that the mayor runs do not. They lost $48 million last year on the ferries, the local ferries. I'd love to see it, but they're not practical. But something with long-term parking where you could get on a ferry and go right into the terminal and not have to worry about parking, I think would be great.
Oh, amazing. She wouldn't have a clue about that. When I say she, folks, AOC, that's why we need John Cummings to be the congressman of the 14th Congressional District, because he's mature, let me use that, and experienced. Let me say that.
And you know what?
We can't have this young kid dictating and implementing law that's responsible not only for the 14th Congressional District, for the country, John Cummings,
Yeah, you know what, too, Lou, is that our slogan from the beginning was, I am you. I live your life. I live in the district. I work in the district. I bank in the district. I know where the good pizza is. That's in my commercial. It's things like that. I know the restaurants. I know the people. Why would you want somebody representing you in Washington who wasn't you?
Yeah.
And that's basically who the congresswoman is. She misrepresented who she was to get elected. She said she grew up in a neighborhood, and she did not. She grew up in Yorktown, and that's fine. I have no problem with that. But I have 60 years of experience being in this area, and I think that translates extremely well when it comes to representation.
Democrats pretty much do that. They take over a district that they don't even live in or have no connection. They have no experience, and no one said anything. I could think of Maxine Waters, just one, So, what's your thoughts on Nancy Pelosi.
I think all of them. In favor of term limits. At
Right.
one time I wasn't, because I just thought that it assumed that the people weren't smart enough to get the deadwood out of office. But now I don't
Right.
know that they are. I don't think enough people are engaged politically, and they just keep voting for the same people over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big problem.
And
So I
she's-
think that you should probably get about a 12-year limit as to how long you can serve any combination, House and Senate, 12 years in the Congress period. And that's it. When you get people in there 40, 50 years, they're wielding power and making money, and that's about it. I don't think they're people at all.
Yeah, it's amazing how they go in there. And I don't know anyone that has left and not didn't leave as a millionaire,
Yeah, and that wasn't the idea. And that's, the reason there's no term limits, and I'll go all history teach you on here.
Yeah.
The reason there's no term limits is because, one, originally Congress was a part-time job. They only met 5 months out of the year, and they got paid per diem originally. So you had to stop your life, whatever you were doing. If you were a lawyer, a doctor, a business owner, a farmer, you stopped your life. You went about the business of the government for a couple of months, and then you picked up, you went back to your life, and it was no easy trip to Washington back then. You went back to work, and then you had to stop again. So it was a real sacrifice to serve.
Yeah.
So they figured, well, nobody's going to do this for a long time. It's really, truly service, and you really have to sacrifice to serve.
Yeah.
So why would anybody want to do it for a long time? Well, now that it's full-time and it's $175,000 a year and all the perks that go with it, maybe we need to think about limiting how long people can serve.
It's just amazing. So your thoughts on 12 years term limits? Is that what you just
I think
said?
12 years, a combination in Congress, three House terms, which would be 6 years,
Yeah,
maybe one
I think
Senate
so.
term if you want to run for the Senate, or 2 Senate terms. I mean, I hate to get rid of experienced people like that.
Yeah, I know.
But I think that the way it's gone, it's just become, there's too much influence being peddled around. People get too in bed with corporations. You end up with the crony capitalism that really hurts us more than anything else. And I think that's probably something that we're going to have to look into.
Are you concerned, as many people are that I talk to, including me, is that the Democratic Party, aside, no secret, they become extreme left, all the way left, like they just fell off a cliff or something. But now, like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said, I'm quoting her, I am going to start a revolution in the Democratic Party, unquote. And it seems like she has. So are you concerned that this Democratic Party, which we could live with, like you said a moment ago, we could work with them, but now it's extreme communism in plain English. Are you concerned that we may be heading in that direction because of people like her who are getting elected, John Cummings?
Yeah, she was right. I mean, she did start a revolution in that party, and she, along with some others, have basically hijacked that Democrat Party that we knew, and they've dragged it all the way over to the left. But I think that helps the Republicans a great deal. It certainly helped me in this race. I don't think that at any other time I could be successful in a race like this. When you look at the odds and you look at the demographics, but I am reaching those middle of the ground people, middle of the road people, and I can't tell you how many people I've spoken to that have told me, I have never, ever voted for a Republican in my life, but I am voting for you. I will not vote for her. Because it's gone that far to the left. They know that I have a bit more common sense. I have more experience. I'm much more middle of the road than she is. And while they like some of the progressive ideas, they don't like all of them, especially the people, like I said, especially when it comes to private health insurance, especially when it comes to 401ks, and especially when it comes to defunding the police. Nobody wants that.
Yeah, I know. She just joined the club, like many of them do, for the self-serving reasons. And her living boyfriend, Riley Roberts, I'm almost sure that's his name. It is his name. And there was some talk that he works on a computer at home. So she put him on her payroll, but I did my little research on it. She was slick. She didn't exactly put him on the payroll. She included him on her PAC money.
Right.
And she included him on, well, I'm telling you, it's a sneaky way. She's supposed to be concerned about the working person, and she double talks, right? And she's criticizing the Republican Party for doing things like that. And she's doing worse than that. The guy doesn't leave his house. He works on his computer. He's receiving PAC money, plus his email is paid for. You are the Congress. You're going to pay for it. It's going to come out of the Congressional I guess you call it Bill. So he has a congressional email address. So are you talking about that when you go out there, John?
Yeah, not really. But I mean, I could obviously, but people are so much more concerned about what's going on the ground,
Yes.
with their lives. That they're much more interested in someone who's going to serve the people than for things like that. There was a couple of weeks ago, the Congresswoman put out a makeup video on YouTube, 15 minutes of makeup tips. People ask her, wow, how do you look so great? And that same day, I was involved in a street cleanup under the 6 train. So I'm out there raking garbage, cleaning up garbage on Westchester Avenue, and she's doing a makeup video. So we had some fun with that on social media. We put up a meme that said "Service to Stardom." Which one do you want? I'm ankle deep in garbage, and she's doing a makeup video. People are far more interested in that than they are about all the intricacies of fundraising and stuff like that. And just for the record, we've done very well raising money. I haven't taken any PAC money. The only committee money that I've gotten was from Mike Huckabee's committee, and that was because of my pro-life stance.
I don't have a problem doing it, but if you want to give out any kind of email or addresses that you like, the people that want to get involved, whether they volunteers, and we only got a short time left for the election, but obviously you can still need money, and people can donate. So if they want to make, how would they do that? Although I see it online, but for the sake of the audience, where can they send donations to?
Cummings2020.com. You could probably see it up over my shoulder here on the signs. Cummings2020.com.
Very good.
We've raised more money than any non-incumbent in the country, with the exception of Lacey Johnson, who's the gentleman that's running against Representative Ilhan Omar. We've been extremely successful, but even with that, Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez has raised twice what we've raised, so she's very well funded. But we've done a great job here, and it's really allowed us to get our message out, to get into digital advertising, to get into cable television. We've done a ton of mailings. People know what we stand for. People know who we are. People recognize me in the street constantly from the commercials, and that's going to help us tremendously. We really appreciate the donations. It's been great.
So you could pretty much tell in most cases by the amount of donations, it shows you the interest. So Cummings for Congress is probably the best way to go.
No, Cummings2020.com. That's it.
Cummings2020.com. That's true. I have that in front of me.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's like I said, it's been unbelievable. We've raised, as of September 30th, was $8.8 million.
Great.
And our average donation is $35.
Wow.
So we're not getting all of this big money stuff. It's been the average person from all 50 states. I mean, she's a national figure, so the campaign attracted national attention, and that's how we've been able to do what we're doing.
Well, that's amazing. It's amazing. I congratulate you on that. I got to go back to another question that it's more local, and although it's national as well, is your thoughts on the mask wearing? Because this actually came from a police officer that went into a location with no mask, and they were plainclothes police officers, and none of them wore a mask. It was a specialized unit, and the owner said you were not allowed it. It's against the law to not wear a mask. And they said, well, how about reciting the law? There is no law. You agree with me? There is no law where you're compelled. Now I'm not saying whether you should wear it or not wear it, but what I'm saying is there's actually no law that no law in the books that you say you have to wear a mask. In fact, John, if you recall, which I do, 240.35, I think it is, that if you wear a mask in public or on the public transportation, it is a B misdemeanor.
Right. Yeah, I remember that being on there. I do remember that. I think there's been far too much confusion, and there's been no consistency with most of this virus, the response to most of this virus. The big problem that I had, at least at the state level, was that the legislators so freely gave up the representative part of their job to the governor, meaning that we had no voice in any of this. So our representatives just said, okay, governor, just do what you got to do.
Wow.
That is so short-sighted, and it's so shortchanges who we are as a people. This is a representative government, a representative democracy, and in almost every case, state legislators just gave up their power unilaterally to governors. It should have never happened. It should have never happened, because just what you talked about before with the congresswoman, questioning people, you want people in the legislature who have expertise. So I would imagine that in every state legislature, you have doctors, you have business people, you have educators that might have input when it comes to, mask wearing or any of the policies that were, even people in healthcare. So perhaps somebody could have stood up and said, hey, putting people with COVID into nursing homes is a bad idea.
Yeah.
I mean, they basically just gave up all of our we the people's power to governors around the country, and I think that was probably the biggest mistake that anybody made in this COVID outbreak.
And you got people like here in New York State, Andy Cuomo, that jumped on that. He became like his own dictator, which he was anyway prior to that. Another question similar to mask wearing is that's one of the questions is, it's against my religion to wear a mask, and I'm not allowed to go into these different places, but it's against my religion. Just a question that they would want to address to you as running for your Congress. Obviously, I know what you could do, but they probably would like to hear your input on that, or your answer or response to that, John Cummings.
All of those health issues with the mask wearing and everything like that, I thought that all of it should be handled locally. I mean, it's been, the way this has been, has gone around this country. The reactions have been so different. The timing has been different. Obviously, it went through New York like fire early on, and then now you look at the numbers; they're very, very low, and they're hesitant to open up.
Wow.
And then you have other places that treated it completely differently. And so my thing with the masks and everything else, I think it's got to be handled at the most local of levels. I see former Vice President Biden saying you should have a national mandate. I don't like those. I don't like the word government mandate, that phrase, but anything nationally makes me suspicious, whether it's a national mandate for mask wearing and,
correct.
A national minimum wage. I don't even like national law enforcement reform. That came up during the Congress after the George Floyd incident. And I don't think that, and I think you'll appreciate this, I don't think anybody in the New York City Police Department has any right to tell people what the South Dakota State Troopers have to do.
Right.
Policing is so different. It's so diverse around the country, rural, suburban, urban, that they should be doing their own thing. And I feel that way about most things. Response should be local unless it's truly a national issue like civil rights and maintaining social order and border security and things like that.
Great answer. Great answer. So it should be local, just like you mentioned. Okay. Any other thoughts? Now, is Hunt Point's market in your area as well? I think it is.
It's just outside the district. It's really close. It's really, really close, but it's right out. But like I said, we do have 11 of those opportunity zones that have picked up. You have Zariga, that's part of ours. Down in Brush Avenue is part of ours. A couple of Willis Point over by City Field. Those are all areas that certainly could use some improvement, and hopefully we could do that through the opportunity zones that Tim Scott put in. Like I said, $75 billion of private investment so far have created a ton of jobs, and the Congresswoman is against it. So
wow. Well, the reason why I brought up Hunt's Point, because you mentioned trucking before and how we can improve conditions for truckers coming in, and that's a big area. If you want to talk about trucks, Hunt's Point.
They've done a good job down there, rerouting, changing the roads in and out and everything. I was down there a couple of weeks ago, and it's amazing what they've done down there. But like I said, most of those trucks come off of 95. And then they get back on 95 and they get stuck all day and they time out and they clog up our streets. And I'm not blaming them. They legally have to get off the highway. But can you imagine that there's no truck stop from Giant Stadium to Norwalk, Connecticut? There's nothing. I mean, and you have to go through the Cross Bronx and you're going to get stuck. And then you're going to get stuck in Stamford, Connecticut too, if you're familiar with that. So you're going to sit if you're a trucker. So they need a place to take a break.
I know. And one of de Blasio's programs was no trucks in Manhattan. Talk about people that don't have a clue what's going on. That's just one minor thing that he doesn't have a clue on what's going on. But he forgot. He wants to go to a restaurant. He doesn't have no clue where the food was coming from. No trucks in Manhattan. And then someone said to him, "Hey, wait a minute. We're going to close down McDonald's and Burger King and or major restaurants and things like that." So trucking is an important issue, and I'm glad you brought that up, John Cummings.
Yeah, and it's like I said, it's so important to everybody in the area, especially in the Bronx and Queens and District.
Yeah.
All you have to do is drive around and you see these guys and women just parked alongside of the road, and they have to take a certain amount of time.
I know
off.
that.
They have to get out. And the one place that we identified was the old New York bus service up by Co-op City. Be a great spot. You could build a ramp right in and a ramp right out like they do on the Jersey Turnpike. You don't have to interrupt the neighborhood at all. It creates jobs because people have to work the rest area, restaurants, get some showers for the people, have a place where they can plug in rather than run their cars and create pollution, rather than run their trucks rather than create pollution. I think it's a no-brainer. Will cost a lot of money, no doubt, but
Yeah.
you know, the president and the Congress have both talked about a $1 trillion infrastructure program. Hopefully, if I get in, we can bring some of that here to the Bronx and Queens.
Well, I think we got 30 seconds left, or no, we got a minute left. So summing up in 1 minute, I know you touched on some of the things you're looking forward to do or implement. Just what else that you would like to change or add, or John Cummings?
I think, Lou, what the people have responded to most is the idea of local representation.
Yes.
People in this district feel so detached from what's going on in Washington and what goes on in government in general. And I'm a guy, like I said, I'm from here. I grew up here. I live here. And I think that you combine that with my life experience, both as an educator and in law enforcement, I think I'd be a great representative for the people of this district in Washington.
Are you going to have an office in the Bronx as well, in Queens and the Bronx, where people have access to you?
Yeah, most definitely. When we get in, we'll have a place in the Bronx and in Queens, and we'll have it well staffed. I'll say one thing. When Joe Crowley was in, Joe Crowley had a great staff. I used to call people in his office. I knew people in his office. If you had a question, you called up and you asked. You called Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez's office. You get a phone message. I remember we got a phone message that said, "I'm in Iowa with Bernie Sanders. Thank you." Not what we needed to hear.
Interesting, because people want to, and she's pretty much, when I say she, AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, I just changed it around a little bit, is more focusing on national than local, which is more important. So, John Cummings, I want to thank you for being the guest on Streetwise. You folks, we do need John Cummings. And by the way, I'm not a registered Republican, but I think you'd be, well, I'm independent. That's no secret. But I think you'd be our guy, important to Bronx and Queens, John Cummings.
Well, thank you, Lou. Thank you for having me. We just got the endorsement of the Independence Party, so we have that too. We're on two lines. We're on Republican and Conservative. We just got the endorsement of the Independence Party, so hopefully that'll help us as well.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, if it helps you, my organization, New York Veteran Police Association, the first police organization to endorse Donald Trump. I don't want to tie that into what you're doing. We can't endorse because since that time we became a not-for-profit, a 501c3. But I can tell you this, it's on the record, the New York Veteran Police Association, which is also national, Lou Telano, president, Richie Ornstein, vice president, and our board the other day gave full support, we can't say endorsement, but our full support for John Cummings to be the congressman in the 14th Congressional District, Bronx and Queens. Thank you for being my guest, John Cummings.
My pleasure, Lou. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Good luck. See you in Washington. Thanks for listening to Streetwise, and this is Lou Telano. And I'll catch you later. Thanks for listening to Streetwise, and this is Lou Telano, and I'll catch you later.